Thanks everyone for joining our second in the ESGF webinar series. Our speakers today are Carlos Downie and Sasha Ames from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and they're going to talk about Metagrid. And Tom Vo, also at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, has contributed to this effort. Go ahead, Sasha.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. So the first part of this talk is an introduction to the Metagrid web application for ESGF. Then I'm going to hand over to Carlos to demo features on, do a live demo of features on Metagrid. So let's get started. If I can advance, okay. Always wants to advance too many slides at once. So quick overview of the ESGF search interface over the years. So the current search interface, if you go to any of the sites main page like esgf-node.llnl.gov, it'll bring you to what's called the COG or Commodity Governance site. It's served the community well enough for nearly the past decade. I think it was released in 2015. According to surveys, it's the most popular way to discover data in ESGF. Large growth in user base, and CMIP 6 has grown rapidly, as it's progressed. And we think the user experience has declined, and issues with the software's aging architecture and lack of scalability. One issue in particular is that it's slow to load data, that is the search results, with non-responsive pages. So something we definitely want to address. Another thing to point out is just, it's an old architecture. We'll get to that. So there is definitely added value to re-engineering our search interface, make it flexible, fast, simple, and have decoupled microservices. So decoupled microservices accommodate future changes. It's much easier to upgrade components without affecting others, and we want to use the latest industry standard software technologies and maintain the project with continuous integration. That is, have your continuous integration for testing the software as you go. So we started with it rather than add it after the fact, which is, often easy to do with rapid prototyping. We want to provide a simple, fast, and intuitive interface where the users can easily manage searches and search results, to download data with the different services. And we want to work closely with the ESGF community during our development cycles. So microservices, well, the user will interface with the browser. The browser will interact with various services on the server and distribute around the federation, including sort of backend APIs to manage sort of user information and the search results, node statuses. Also think about content management, but not something that we're doing at this stage. So what we have in the microservices architecture, and we can do it by comparing it with COG, and we call it a monolithic architecture because everything is deployed from a single point run by the Django. Even though in the front end, we also have an old UI framework for JavaScript provided by Yahoo. It became pretty obsolete early on. Around the same time, that's when more advanced JavaScript frameworks became available, and also eventually becoming TypeScript, so a very popular one. We look at what we use for Metagrid is React, which is developed and maintained by Facebook, and probably the most popular framework, and so it's a large open source community and lots of modules to kind of give it legs for enhanced usability. But with the microservices, sort of different components are better decoupled, so the front end and back end are served from different components. It just makes things more flexible. So we definitely had a rationale behind choosing these particular technologies. So what React gives us is client-side rendered application, and it's more interactive on the user end. So it's declarative. So React will do the heavy lifting for page updates. The other approach is having the Python backend do it, serve the pages, and we have encapsulated components to manage each state. But we still use Django for a backend for providing a REST framework. So the front end, just instead of querying for pages, it queries for content. This is based on a mature ecosystem. So Django and Python is popular, highly maintained, active open source community. And yes, we're attempting to build scalable REST APIs, and lets us sort of do some plug and play. For instance, with search, right now we're using the ESG search API that's backed by Solr, but this is going to change, and the sooner the better, possibly using the Stack API, or we can talk directly to the Globus search API, which is something that we'll address later in the works. So just to summarize some of the basic features we have in the Metagrid deployment, it's containerized. I mean, it's been a standard deployment practice for a while, and we've built this on Docker Compose, and we're working on Helm charts. That's actually what's prototyped and will transition to production at Oak Ridge on their OpenShift platform, similar to, so with the Helm charts, you're going to deploy on Kubernetes. We use GitHub Actions for our continuous integration, and have a very high bar. It's 100% test coverage. Mostly, I think there's a few little exceptions that we don't cover. That means every line of code must go through the testing and infrastructure, so no exceptions. It sort of makes it's the trade. It's much more stability, less likely that you'll hit an issue when we add features and upgrade, but more work to be done to make sure that all the tests pass, but ensures higher quality in the long run. We so remotely have these hooks in GitHub to manage dependencies, so we're not hunting for upgrades. We can kind of, a lot of cases, if things work out, you just push a button and upgrade packages. Doesn't always work, but ideally that's what we have. So as far as features go, the baseline is to have the same features in COG, with the exception of the content management. So for, to provide information about a project, let's say the different phases of CMIP, we're kind of defer that to other sites. So the CMIP IPO is maintaining sites for CMIP. And I think that's, we don't need to be redundant and have that also in the ESGF site. We can refer users. They want more information, go to the source, go to the CMIP IPO sites. Same with like E3SM is maintaining a website that can provide lots of information. So the features in particular, the search, the data cart, browser download, and we can have user profiles for some specific user information. And right now we're using the key cloak is identity access management service based on protocols you may have heard of, OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. We support, and this is not in COG, as you can use the user cart as an anonymous user. You don't need to sign in, so it just saves it in the browser, unlike with the old platform. We can save and reproduce searches, and what's different is that now the search is auto filtering, so when you select something new, it will automatically update your results. And we can summarize the data cart with the total files and content. So another, for tracking purposes, one site we've hooked into is called Hotjar, and it allows users to provide feedback and rate their experience. So we've gotten valuable user feedback and suggestions. And we can also record some sort of user interaction to see how people are using the site. And based on looking at sort of informal survey of people who bothered to respond, we're getting mostly like higher marks. And some people don't like it, and that's understandable, but majority of people have given us good marks. So on to some of the more recently added features over the last year or so, since this project has been going on about 3 years since its kind of conception to initial design phase started in 2020. So we added a tutorial based on Joyride to walk a user through the process. By the way, we're going to demo all these features. I'm just kind of sort of summarizing now. We have shareable search links, some, I guess, additional UI enhancements. I think maybe Carlos will remember and point those out. Some features under development. Actually, we're quite close with the Globus transfer, and we will demo that today. I think we want to support for wget scripts. We're transitioning to new means for authorization of restricted data. So instead of using certificates or the login prompt, we're just going to embed a token into wget script, so it's a seamless ability to access restricted data, unlike what we have now. We want to support a login with a Globus auth system. As far as release statuses, we initiated our beta release over a year ago on LNL server, and we're trying to capture user feedback so we can ideas for additional features. In the summer 2022, we also started using Google Analytics, and we'll actually show some results from that. They've been interesting. What's tricky is sometimes there's been spikes, so interesting things happen. We think that just occasionally bots have been pounding the server and it messes up with our Google Analytics. But we get insight into demographics and engagement time this way. So I'll give a quick timeline for planned releases for updating, sort of the platform, getting us to production, since we're interested in doing that at Lawrence Livermore in this, hopefully by this half of the year. So we have a new beta release coming out that does not include Globus transfer, but updates the packages. So that's not really will affect any functionality, but we're adding more messaging because we want to provide useful information about the platform, which is ESGF in general. Later in April, I think we will have on the beta site the Globus transfer capability for everyone who has that link. We want to move to a release candidate, fix any other issues and deploy that on Kubernetes. So we have a cluster at Lawrence Livermore called Nimbus, and support lots of different things such as Jupyter notebooks, but also we can run Metagrid there as well. And what we would do is, this is the big release where normal traffic that goes to the ESGF node LNL site would arrive at Metagrid instead, but we might not necessarily turn off COG. It would just be kind of hidden. So if you really prefer the old experience, you can still use it for a while, but we can't run it forever. There are sort of reasons for that, but we plan to document well what the changes are. So we're not, it's going to be disruptive, but we don't want it to be too disruptive. We want to follow up with other sites that are interested in deploying as well. So now we'll talk about what next steps sort of beyond that. So what are the additional features as a sort of future work list. So in order to, I mentioned that token integration, we just have to fix an issue with the Keycloak integration. If we can do that, then we're able to come up with a timeline and have other sites upgrade from COG to Metagrid, because this will sort of support the restricted data integration, which is key for other projects. While CMIP data, E3SM data has been published open, for instance, Cordex is still restricted data, and we want that to work kind of seamlessly. It's not. So once that's the case, then we can have an upgrade plan federation wide. Part of this could be adding links. So right now in COG, you can navigate to other ESGF sites, other search interfaces. We don't have that in Metagrid, but we could add it, or at least add some simple navigation, maybe just a link at first to other, to a page of the other sites, but we'll consider that feature. Right now we are prototyping a search feature for targeting the Globus hosted index. It's part of Globus search. So potential next generation platform for search, at least for the DOE sites. But much work has to be done to make that interoperable with other search platforms. We're talking about switching from Keycloak to other platforms. I mean, it's all similar protocol standard, but there might be some slight differences. So we're looking at we talk about Globus Auth, which there's already some integration, but also EDI check-in and EduGain, and how those auth platforms can be interoperable. You can use either as kind of your probably IDP proxy, sort of your launch point for when a user presses a login button, they're taken to a page that might let them select an identity provider or log in. So that could be Globus Auth, which kind of does that when people familiar with Globus, when you go to log into Globus, it lets you select what's your institution to find an identity. So we will have something similar, or it might, for some sites, might just be that. Next, we want to integrate the errata system that tracks issues with. Now it's just CMIP6 data set, and we could do something like display that information or have color-coded icons. Maybe if it's a user submitted errata, one color. If it's a bad known issue, it could be a nasty red check mark. But that'll be very useful. We've been discussing user notifications, so Metagrid can have temporal searches that it reruns to suggest to the user what data has been more recently published that matches the search criteria. And just a final note is, right now my mobile device support isn't particularly good, but it's sort of, we can ensure that we have sort of compatible style sheets and templates to support that. Okay, so next up, we're moving on to the demo, and it's going to be in 3 parts. So part 1 is basic features. I think part 2 is going to be Globus transfer. And part 3 will be Google Analytics. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Carlos, unless there are any very quick questions. All right. So Carlos can.
All right. Let's share the screen. Hi, everyone. So can you see the screen?
It looks good.
All right. So for this demo, first, I'll go through what we have right now currently available to access. If you go to ames2.llnl.gov, you'll find this page. And so this is where we're at right now, which is version 1.0.7. As Sasha mentioned earlier, we're working on currently the 0.8 version, and then after that, we'll be integrating Globus as well. The first thing you might run into is there's this little hotjar where you can actually provide feedback, and it's always available there for any users who want to give us feedback about something that they would like or see. It has been a good source of tips, and we do look through it regularly to try and see if there's anything that we can improve, and we'll create issues on it and get to it when it is most possible to get to that feature. The other thing is we have this question mark here, and as well as up here, it's the same thing. It's a help. So if you click on help, it'll give you a link to our documentation, and then it'll also have a button which you can do to actually start a tour of the interface. So if I click here, it'll give me a tour of the main search page, and then it'll kind of give you a small intro. And then as you can see, this tour will actually point out every single element of the user interface. And as it does, it'll give you a quick explanation about what that does. It's also an interactive tour, so if I do this again, it's actually going to click that button for us, so it could continue showing us the rest. So these tours are available whenever you need to double check something if you would like, or if you're a first-time user, you can go through this tour and actually get a very good kind of detailed walkthrough through our interfaces. I'll skip this tour for now because I'm going to actually do a live one. Every page has its own tour, so I can actually go to help again, and this time it's a data cart tour. So once again, it'll do the same tour, but for this page. So each page has its own tour to kind of give people an idea of what features are available and what you can do. It's that is the Joyride tour that Sasha had mentioned earlier. And that's one of the improvements we've done since we got back into it last year. There's been a few other improvements, including trying to make this interface more compact, because you used to have to scroll sideways just to see the different areas. So we've tried to make the interface a bit more compact. We also made these more compact if you like a minimal kind of interface, but you also have the option to expand everything if you'd like as well. To the left here, we actually have our facets, which you can use to generate a search criteria and filter out all the results. So for now, without any filters, we have about 12 million, almost 13 million results. So now if I actually select some of these filters, I can reduce that number. I can choose what data node I want to get my data from. I can choose the source, ID, various different filters here. We also have additional filters at the bottom, so you can choose for the latest version or all versions. You can choose originals or replicas or both. Both is default. You'll notice here we have this warning that says if a data set has been retracted. So you'll still see it in the results, but you won't be able to download it because it's no longer available. It's retracted. So I'll go back to latest. You also have a calendar option here, so you can actually set in the version date range. And then you could also filter by specific file names. So we have plenty of filtering options available. Once you have the results that you'd like, you also have the option to save this search. So if I click Save Search up here in the right top corner, you'll see that over here we actually have that search saved. This is a search I had set up previously, but I could just remove it like that when I don't need it anymore. So now if I go back to this page and I clear everything, and then I guess I'll clear the cart. So this is, let's say you're just starting up again and you want to start a fresh search, but then you want to go back to that other search you had done a few days ago or an hour ago. Go to your saved searches that you saved, and then you have it here, and then it'll have an icon to actually apply this. So if I click this, there you go. It has that same search results. All of those fields that you selected earlier are in there. Another nice feature about this interface is you can actually copy your search. So if you copy this, you can actually get a shareable link. So if you take that link and you give it to somebody, so I'll just start a new tab. And then if I paste that link, then I can not only go to Metagrid, but then I'll also get that same search that you did. So it's a way to kind of share your searches with others if you wanted to, very quickly and easily. You can also save these to a text file if you prefer not to have them saved up here. Either way, it's a nice addition. The next part of the interface actually is we have this table, and as I mentioned before, we compacted everything, but there is a lot of data available at your fingertips. So for example, if you see a data set here, you can actually click on this little triangle icon and it'll actually expand so you can get more information on the specific files and the metadata. You can filter this metadata to look up for certain values as well. You can get citation data if it's available. You can have links to the ES docs, the PID. So with the files, these are now loaded, you actually have access to individual files. In this case, this data set just has one file, but if I go down to this one here that has 7, and then we see if that list will load. Again, similar citation data and other things are available. And then here we have the individual files that are part of this data set, and you can actually download them directly via HTTP, one file at a time. You could get an OpenDAP URL. You could even get more information from each file. If you want to see the actual metadata for each file, you have that option here. So there's a lot of information, but we try and compact everything so that you can quickly see the bigger picture if you need to. If I add a data set, it'll get added to my cart. And then if I go back, I'm not sure why it did that. Let's see. Go to the cart, and now we have the data sets. This allows us to download multiple data sets instead of just one. So for example, if I wanted to just download these two, I can select the two that I want and then click download, and that'll initiate a download. You also have the option, if you just want to download one, you can actually do it directly right here on the first page. This demo is showing just the wget, but you can actually also, we're right now working on the Globus side. So I'll demo that a little bit later. Once you're in your cart, you have the same data available again from here, and you can choose which items you want. You'll notice this little icon here. Sometimes you'll get some feedback on what the server looks like. So here the check mark means that the data node is online and good to go. So when you download, you'll be fine. If you go to the node status tab here, you'll actually get a list of which nodes are up and running and ready. And that might be helpful in case you are running into some kind of download issues. You can check and see if the status is good or if it's on your end or things like that, which is very helpful. So I think with that, we also have our sign-in options, and we are currently working to transition, as Sasha mentioned, into a kind of Globus login cert. But right now we have Keycloak. So basically, as a user, these searches and cart are being saved to your local browser. But let's say you work across multiple browsers, or you're working in different places, like at home and then at your workplace. If you actually have a Keycloak sign-in and you log in, then you can actually have this accessible from whichever browser you use. As long as you log in, you'll be able to access your cart and your saved searches. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and transition to the Globus demo. So this is looking the same as the previous one, with one bigger difference, which is we have the Globus download option now. I already have a few items in the cart, so I'll go to the cart. And from here, we'll see there's a few different items. If I select some of these to download, I have the wget, which is what was there before, but now we also have a Globus download option. So with the Globus download option, if I click download, first thing it's going to do is bring up this pop-up, and this isn't going to come up every time, but it'll come up if we need to get permissions and we need to redirect the endpoint and whatnot. So let me go ahead and click yes, and I'll get redirected to provide my permission. Now, the next thing is it should be refreshing. I do apologize if there is any hiccups, because this is actually still demo version, but it was working the other day. Let me try that again. Okay. So it looks like normally what it'll do is it'll then take you to Globus to select an endpoint. In this case, I'm not exactly sure. This was working perfectly. It always happens with live demos, but it's detecting that there's already an endpoint selected, so it's ready to start the transfer. So if I click yes, it'll actually start the transfer. let me just refresh this page and see if I can get this going. Let's do default. Okay. So you'll see here now it submitted successfully. If I went to Globus, I could actually see the progress in the downloads. What happens is you'll give it permission once, and then once you do, it should save that permission. So that might be what happened in my case. It already saw that I had done this before. And then it'll let you have an option to set your endpoint, which could be Globus itself somewhere or your personal desktop. So I have, for example, I was using my personal collection, which is connected to my desktop using the Globus front end. And then from there, you can basically choose if you want it to be a default endpoint or not. And in this case, if it is a default, then afterwards, whenever you want to do a download, you just click download and it'll do it. You don't have to go through those redirects or anything because the endpoint has been saved. And if you change your mind and you want to actually specify an endpoint, you can always choose specify, and then it'll take you through the step again of actually selecting your endpoint. So let's see if it'll work this time. Okay. So I'll choose my Globus personal collection as my endpoint, and then I could create a new folder. I'll just use this one for now. These are the two previous files that I just downloaded earlier. So I'll just use the same endpoint again. I was just demoing the fact that you can select an endpoint. And then here's that option I mentioned before that you can save the endpoint as a default if you like, or if you prefer to hold on to the default you have, and this was just a one-off transfer option, then you just click no, and then you can start the transfer. As mentioned before, this hasn't actually been released yet. There are still a few minor bugs, as even we noticed now, but we're getting pretty close to having it ready for release. The next thing we're planning to do is probably see if there's ways to further improve the flow and see if there's other ways to make sure that we have the Globus side of things all working well with this app. But overall, this is what we're planning to integrate next as soon as we have it all working smoothly. And then the third part of the demo is we'll just take a minute or two. A useful thing about our app here is we're actually also able to get some user data related to demographics and who's downloading, who's accessing the site. And we're doing that through Google Analytics. So if we go here, we actually have a couple analytics that are showing kind of where we're at even now with our beta version, which isn't really being widely published, but there is already traffic and use of the beta, and we have been getting some feedback from that. So here we can kind of see what new users are looking like and where they're coming from. We have Google organic search and different places here. These filters, we put them in place to try and filter out the fact that there are a few spikes now and then in new users, which don't seem to be natural spikes. So the analytics are still useful because you can see overall what type of traffic you're getting. And when you see those spikes, you can get an idea of whether it was actually, bots or something else accessing the site. And it'll give us important insights on, how to handle the server and how to handle users. And here we have a form that will show kind of the demographics of our users. So for now, it looks like the majority are actually from China, with United States next, and Germany, Netherlands, India. Down here, we get some useful information on terms of how much sessions are engagement sessions and what the rate is and how long each engagement is. So some of these demographics and other user information and metadata that we're getting from the analytics can actually be further improved or refined, in terms of we can actually add some refinements to our front end to actually look for specific things as well. For now, though, we are just using the basic predefined setup that Google Analytics has. And even with that basic setup, we're already getting some useful information. And these are all helpful insights. Here we get our average engagement time to see, well, what is the average time that users are actually on the site when they first log in? And hopefully, if it is a longer time, it's because they're actually exploring the data and it's not due to some kind of technical issues with their downloads. Some of the engagement seems to be pretty quick and short. If users know what data they need and they just download it, it should be pretty fast. So helpful insights. This paired along with our Hotjar, our Hotjar kind of information is very helpful to kind of give us ideas of where the traffic's going, what users are doing and using, and what they think of the app itself. So it's very helpful to get us to kind of find out how we can make more improvements to Metagrid moving forward. With that, I'll go ahead and end the demo and open it up to questions.
Hey, Carlos, before you stop the screen share, how about open a new tab and go to app.globus.org. App. Yeah, the file collections, but you can navigate to activity. I just wanted to highlight that, you know, then the most recent transfer was, just so we know, we're not pretending here. These are real transfers that are getting submitted, and they're small, so you're not gonna get a lot of speed. But we pre-selected smaller, like data sets, not the longer ones.
And there's been plenty of transfer activity and it's all been working. It's more of the interface part that we've been waiting to make sure it works on the on the Metagrid side.
So I mean, we're prepared to leave the dev site up for those who want to be very early adopters of Globus transfer. I mean, one warning is it might may be a little more likely to go down for an update, while the beta site we tried to have fewer updates, fewer disruptions. I've been able to successfully transfer to OLCF open, so I think that works. My guess is it probably will work with NERSC. Interesting, there's a Lawrence Livermore, I guess it's a restricted endpoint, and we haven't been able to transfer there. So there's something different about I think the authorization that we'll need to address, but we think most seems to work with most target endpoints for moving data. I think that's it. We can definitely open up for more questions.